Okay, well, we want to welcome everyone. I'm Lindsay Masters. I'm the executive director at Arch, and we're really excited to be helping close out Affordable Housing Week by talking about a topic that's really near and dear to Arch, and I think to all of the panelists here today. Just a quick bit about the format for this talk. We've got several panelists lined up to share information with you. And after each person, we're going to pause for questions, and we'll ask that you put your questions into the chat. We'll have a staff person kind of monitor the chat. We'll read those out. During the talk, we are asking folks to stay on mute just so we kind of minimize interruptions. We might not have time for every question, but we're going to be trying to collect all of them, and we'll think about if we have a lot of unanswered questions at the end, how we can follow up on those. So I'm really excited to be here with this group in particular, talking about this topic. I want to do a really quick round of introductions. We have Debbie Lacey with Eastside for All, Adam Weinstein with the City of Kirkland, Raquel from the Arch team, and Cliff with Habitat for Humanity, all of whom have prepared information they want to share with you about affordable homeownership and middle housing. And if we could go to the next slide, I'm going to just walk you through a really brief introduction to this topic, what it is, why it's important, why we're talking about it. Many of you probably already know what middle housing is, but just briefly summarized, it is a term that was coined probably over a decade ago now to describe housing types that fit in with single-family neighborhoods, so compatible in the scale and the form, but offer more density. So that includes many of the housing types you see on this slide here today. We can go to the next slide. Importantly, there's been a lot of recent state policy action on housing and middle housing in particular. The goal of much of this legislation has been to increase density, increase housing choice, and importantly, to increase affordability. Namely, we are here to talk about, there's been a number of bills, but we're namely here to talk about HB 1110, which was specifically aimed at opening up single-family neighborhoods to middle housing types. And it did that by requiring local jurisdictions to adopt specific density rules per lot, depending on the size of the jurisdiction. In East King County here, we have cities in all three of these tiers. Up at the top, Bellevue, Kirkland, and Redmond that are going to have to go up to 4 to 6 units per lot. And then we've got cities also down in the bottom, middle, and bottom tiers. And even in those jurisdictions that are only required to go up to 2 units per lot, we see this as a pretty significant change and opportunity that we are excited to figure out how to take advantage of. There are some specific provisions in the state law around affordable housing that you can see here. These could end up being pretty helpful for builders like Habitat. But we also think that there's a pretty low likelihood that private builders will use those. And so we're interested in helping cities to figure out how to take advantage of the flexibility the state allows in coming up with other affordable housing provisions. There's a lot more to the bill that we can also share out afterwards that are include additional incentives that try to make this housing more feasible. But that said, there's a lot of flexibility in the state law that leaves discretion at the local level, which means there's a lot of important policy decisions still to be made. Next slide. So I want to briefly hit this topic. A lot of the state policy language also talks about and has been talking for a few years about the importance of addressing racially disparate impacts of past policy. And we really can't talk about affordable homeownership with talking about who has access to it and who does not. So I just want to plug, this is a much longer topic for another webinar probably, but there's a really fantastic report that was put out by the National Fair Housing Alliance and other partners that's documenting a very long history of housing discrimination in our state, and as well as the ongoing impacts of what that means today. And if you go to the next slide, most know that there are disparate rates of homeownership by race nationally and in our state. And not just, and that's even, I think what's interesting about this slide, that's even accounting for income. So even within the same income group, you see disparities by race. Now we can go to the next slide. So middle housing and affordability. So that's what we're here to talk about today. And we think it's really important to kind of take a laser focus to that issue of how affordable middle housing can be. It's often talked about as housing that's affordable by design because it's smaller in scale and hopefully less costly to build than a single family home. However, we know that affordability is really relative to, perhaps to what your income is, what you can afford, and what market you're in. And we know in East King County, studying this topic, middle housing is probably not going to be affordable to people with low and middle incomes without some specific policy choices. And those are part of what Arch is taking a look at now. We do know from past experience and in many jurisdictions that are a part of Arch, that zoning policies can actually capture some value from added density for affordable housing. That can be both in the form of actual affordable homes that are built as a part of private developments. And we've got a program that's created over 700 resale restricted affordable ownership homes through those policies. And it can also be contribution of fees towards that can be used to build affordable housing, say in a habitat project or other places. Next slide. So we just want to share a little bit of data on this affordability spectrum and what it looks like going from market rate single family homes through middle housing types and over to affordable homes that are really built by policy or funding. So we have a few examples of different cities. This is Kirkland. Kirkland is a great example because they've already allowed middle housing and are starting to see some of those housing types built. And we have kind of a data point for what the prices are. You can see for a single family home in Kirkland, you need to make about $800,000 annually to afford to purchase a market rate home. Moving over to cottages and townhouses, those are more affordable than a single family home, but they are not affordable to people with middle incomes. So you still need to make 200 to 300% AMI to be able to purchase those opportunities. We have a couple examples of Arch homes here that again were created through zoning policies. These are affordable at middle incomes. So these are priced by Arch. Raquel will talk to you more about our program and how that works. Let's go to the next slide. And just want to quickly contrast that with Bellevue. So obviously each city is a different housing market. Bellevue's housing market is even more pricey than Kirkland's. So you can see kind of the similar trend play out. But here we also wanted to include not only an example of an Arch home that was created from the city's past inclusionary zoning policy, but also a habitat project that's under development in Bellevue that we're really excited will also be producing even deeper affordability. And next slide. And then finally, we wanted to include one example of a real estate market that is lower cost by comparison. So maybe not like a Bellevue or a Mercer Island, but a little bit more naturally affordable. And here, even in Kenmore, we're seeing single family homes average about $1 million. So you still need about 200% of the median income to be able to purchase a home. The middle housing types get a little closer, around 150 to 170%. but they're still not, as affordable as we can create through policy. So I'll stop there and we can move on to the next slide. So because this is such a huge opportunity, Arch really wanted to bring our member jurisdictions together to study this. We have formed a work group that's taking a look at two key questions. One, how cities can capture some of the value from additional density for affordability. And two, what are other things cities can do to make those projects feasible? What additional incentives or flexibility might they consider? We are in the process of doing this work. We're far along, but not at a place where we have final conclusions yet. But we are engaging with builders. We are doing economic analysis to understand what kind of value is being created, and again, what can be captured for affordable housing. So the next slide really is just highlighting that this is a huge opportunity for our region, for our state. All cities are going to have to do this work and figure out what policy choices they want to make as they update their zoning codes in the next year. It is going to have an impact. It is going to change the landscape, and those policy choices are going to be very important in determining who ends up having access to homeownership in the future. So with that, I want to also give you, in the next slide, a bit of a teaser of what's coming. So our next three speakers are going to be talking to you, digging in more, talking about why this is important, some of the community engagement work that's been done, how planning efforts are proceeding, and again, an example of a city that's already a little further along with middle housing. And then we want to share more about how these affordable homeownership programs work. Who are they serving? How do they maintain affordability and benefit buyers, and so on. So with that, I would love to make sure there's no questions, and then, great, thanks, Raquel. And then hand it over to Debbie.
Thank you, Lindsay. Hi, everyone. Good to see everyone here with Affordable Housing Week. Thank you, Housing Development Consortium. Thank you, Arch, for hosting this session. And I know for many of us, Affordable Housing Week is every week. So I just wanted to quickly share a bit about a project that Eastside for All was very grateful to be part of this last year. And we can go to the next slide. This was a project that was co-sponsored by Arch and the cities of Bellevue, Bothell, Kenmore, Newcastle, and Redmond. And what they wanted to charge us with was to reach out to community members who may not typically be involved in providing public comment or input regarding housing, or more specifically middle housing in this case. So we were to reach out to immigrant and refugee populations, BIPOC communities, lower income renters, seniors, people with disabilities, LGBTQ plus, LGBT. Oh my goodness, I'm not going to do that today. I didn't have enough sleep. Apologies. So we can go to the next slide, and you can see that we had 13 community-based organizations that partnered with us. One of the things I want to highlight about this model is that we were really happy to see this investment being made locally to partner with Eastside-based, community-based organizations that could connect with their own community members in their ways, in their languages, and really be able to share this information with them and gather that input back from, again, communities who may not typically be involved in public processes. At the end, you'll see a link to get the entire report. And so please, if I go too fast, just know that there's information coming your way. And we can go to the next slide. I'll start sharing some of the responses that we got and some of the key data that was collected. So we were able to reach out to majority of the respondents were people of color, almost 80%. Just over half were renters, and about half of the 651 survey respondents indicated that their annual household incomes were $75,000 or less. So depending on how many people in their household, that would be anywhere from maybe 50 to 80% AMI, but certainly well below 100% AMI. And 44% of the surveys were submitted in languages other than English, with the majority still in English, although some non-native English speakers did prefer to respond in English. This involved a lot of not just literal translation, but cultural translation. As Lindsay was showing you, some of the definitions of middle housing, examples of that, we had to convey visuals as well, talk about what it was, go through the explanation that this was not affordable housing, but really explain what it is and what some people are looking at when it comes to including middle housing as part of their spectrum and continuum of housing options, and how that fits into the bigger landscape of how we can all have access to more affordable housing, depending on our income level. So next slide. So we did ask if middle housing were affordable to you, and we gave them some ranges for that, would you be interested in it? And yes, there was a majority there. You can see said they would be interested, and some said maybe, and there was just a minority that said they would not be interested in it, even if they could afford it. Next slide, please. And then we did ask, would these middle housing options be affordable to you? We asked them to indicate if they could afford it now or possibly in the future. So you see just over a third of our respondents did say that they would be able to afford it now or in the future. Almost a third said they wouldn't be able to now, but possibly in the future. About 20% said they weren't likely to be able to afford it, and 16% were unsure. Next slide. And now we were wondering, what is the support for middle housing depending on whether they're renters or homeowners now? And much similar to a lot of other data that's been collected, a lot of other surveys, community polls on this, we do see broad-based support for middle housing. Certainly more of those who are renting are supportive of middle housing, but we did still find a majority, 57% of homeowners in our survey were also supportive as well. Next slide, please. And we asked, even if you can't afford it, do you still support it? And we did this by income. So again, very much a good, strong support as far as the majority of people saying that they would. Perhaps the least likely to support it, with just over half of them saying yes, they would support it, was those in the highest income, making more than $200,000 a year, and about 18% of our respondents were in that category of making that much. Next slide, please. And prior displacement due to housing costs. So we were curious, and again, because this was a community-based initiative reaching out to a range of community members who have been impacted by the lack of affordable housing, lack of options in East King County, we wanted to get a sense of what their experiences have been. And many of them wanted to talk about affordable housing specifically. So we were able to provide them with resources and ways to connect with their cities through the comp plan processes and other methods so that they could have that input. But we did incorporate some things that we knew would be meaningful to them to speak to and share about. So nearly half of the people that we spoke with did have to move due to high costs of rent or owning a home in the area. Next slide, please. And then we asked, if you had to move in the past for financial reasons, would middle housing options have helped you? And a little over half said they feel that the middle housing options might have helped them avoid moving. So that was really interesting to see as well. Next slide, please. So again, I just wanted to allow a little bit of time here for questions. So I know I went through that really fast, but I do want to point you to this resource that is available online. And I also want to share that Guillermo Rivera, my colleague, housing justice organizer with Eastside for All, provided the leadership and staffing for this initiative. And he can put his email address in the chat, and we would welcome additional feedback and questions from you as well if we don't have time today. So I see one question in the chat, representation from senior groups. Seniors were in the mix of all of our communities do serve older adults, and so they were in the mix of all of our outreach efforts for the survey.
Great. Any other questions for Debbie?
We
Okay.
really appreciated the focus on equity again with this initiative because, you know, with all of these planning processes and so much information, there's still a lot of information that doesn't reach people, right? And that's critical to us that we all struggle with that. How do we get information to people so that they can even know about the what's being asked of them, let alone have enough knowledge to be able to respond in meaningful ways to things being asked of them about their input. So this was a process where we didn't just forward a survey link online. We really appreciated being able to take the time to spend with people in small groups, individually, walk them through some materials and background information, answer their questions, and then they participated in the survey. So this was a real wonderful opportunity for our communities of color, immigrant communities, again, renters, lots of different people and populations to be able to participate in ways that were comfortable for them, again, in their languages, and also having that sense that their input really did matter. And we were able to do follow-up with the cities to share these results, of course, and do some follow-up connecting amongst the community leaders and the city staff and leadership in the 5 cities that were represented here. So thank you again to Arch and the 5 cities for supporting that important work. We were really happy to be part of it.
Thanks so much, Debbie. Well, I think we're right on time to move over to Adam. So I'd love to introduce Adam and let him take it away.
Great, thanks, Lindsay. So I'm Adam Weinstein. I'm the Director of Planning and Building at the City of Kirkland. I'm so happy to be here. Thanks again to HDC and Arch for doing this. And I completely second what Debbie was saying. Like, this Affordable Housing Week should be Affordable Housing Year. It's something, we're all talking about and thinking about for the entire year. But really happy to take part in Affordable Housing Week. And congratulations to Debbie and that entire team for doing such a great engagement process on that project. That's really impressive. You know, it's something we never do well enough, it seems. So great job with that, and good information that was generated as well. You can go to the next slide. So I am going to be talking about probably something a little bit different, which is how Kirkland is thinking about middle housing and affordability. And I want to mention too, that this is a very small piece of how we address housing in Kirkland. We have, just like other cities, a very multifaceted approach to dealing with the housing crisis, because that is something that requires a multifaceted approach. And this is a little more probably market driven than regulatory driven, although the regulations are a huge piece of it. But just as an introduction, you know, the cartoon on the left is probably self-explanatory, but this is one of the main drivers for why we decided to amend our middle housing policies, these generational disparities in wealth. And you can think about this in terms of racial disparities and lots of other disparities as well. But right, if you're a Generation Y, Generation X, a lot harder to afford a house and get into the housing market than it was for baby boomers. And then the headline on the right from the New York Times back in 2022, I think is pretty self-explanatory as well, right? Looking for a starter house, you know, good luck, right? And that's not a great message to have to convey to people. And our goal in Kirkland and other cities as well is to do a better job with that. And so that's what led us to rethink our middle housing policy. And you can go to the next slide. I think, you know, in thinking about our solutions for middle housing, we think about, again, regulated affordable housing, and then we think about housing generated by the market. And we think that, you know, housing generated by the market also has an influence on affordable housing as well. I think we can all recognize that building truly affordable housing, whether it's through subsidies or inclusionary zoning, is not going to be sufficient to solve our problem. We're not going to be able to build enough truly affordable housing probably unless the structures of our society change and much more money is invested in affordable housing. The other thing I want to recognize is that poor lower income households and higher income households in certain cases will compete for the same housing if there's not housing in certain income brackets. So for instance, in Kirkland, if there are only $3 million houses and $400,000 condos, wealthy households who might be able to afford $1 million house might be competing for a $400,000 condo. So if we can sort of enlarge the type of housing that's built in the middle, that can actually free up some market rate, but more affordable housing on the lower end of the income scale. This slide here just illustrates one of the things that gave birth, one of the policy documents that gave birth to our recent middle housing program, which is our housing strategy plan, which basically just said, hey, let's look to see if there are different ways where we can build more compact housing, which again, the market will make more affordable than larger housing. And that was adopted in 2018. And you can go to the next slide. Led to us really loosening and liberalizing our rules for middle housing in March of 2020. We have a couple of flavors of middle housing in Kirkland, ADUs, cottage housing, which are houses of less than 1,700 square feet, and duplexes and triplexes, which are pretty self-explanatory. You can go to the next slide. So again, what we did was we really tried to eliminate barriers to building this type of housing. Back in 2019 and 2020, we eliminated parking requirements. We aligned the regulations for this type of housing with the regulations for standard single family housing, but we allowed twice the amount of density. We made the process easier to get a building permit and did lots of other things as well. So again, the rules have been in place in Kirkland since March of 2020. I think we've seen some good progress. We want to do a lot better, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. But again, the red line on this chart shows when our middle housing code was adopted, and then you can see these are issued permits in terms of numbers of units from 2017 to 2023. The black line is the total number of units, and then you can see the other colors represent ADUs and cottages and duplexes and triplexes, and you can see in 2023, we issued about 120 units worth of permits for this more compact and more affordable housing. Not as much demand for duplexes and triplexes. We're going to try to change that, and a lot more interest in developing ADUs and cottages. You can go to the next slide. This next slide really just shows the cumulative number of units that have been developed in Kirkland in the middle housing category. Again, since 2017, we've issued permits for upwards of 400 cumulative units. Again, most of those are ADUs and cottages, and then a small fraction of those are duplexes and triplexes. We want to do better again in that category. But we've had made some good progress in terms of the actual numbers of units that we've had built. I think about a third of our what were historically just single family building permits have been converted to middle housing permits with some commensurate change in affordability as well. All right, you can go to the next slide. The next couple of slides are really just to give everybody a sense of what these look like. One of the big pieces of the conversation that we had with the community was about how these are not threatening, right? These are not threatening to neighborhoods. These are good things. Like, we want them in our neighborhoods. Historic neighborhoods across the region have these types of housing units. They've functioned, super well throughout history, at least, in the last 100 or so years, or 150 years in this region. They provide, lots of housing choice to people who might not otherwise be able to afford a bigger house. But this here is just an example of what our one of the results of our liberalization of ADU regulations has generated. So what you're seeing here is a project site that once had a very small rambler on it. That rambler was demolished, and it was replaced with a primary residence of 1,500 square feet, and then 2 ADUs in the back, one connected to the primary unit and then one disconnected from the primary unit. All of these were condoized and then sold on the market as, again, more affordable home ownership opportunities. And you go to the next slide. This next slide is really just a look at what one of those types of projects looks like. And so you can see this is in our Rose Hill neighborhood, but you can see a primary residence in the front and then 2 cottages in the back, basically. Again, this is very typical in Kirkland. We're seeing, dozens of these developed right now. This illustration here is really just of a condo project, or sorry, a cottage project. It's right up the street from City Hall. Very neo-traditional looking, big porches. They look like single family houses, but they're a lot smaller actually. And you can go to the next slide. So I wanted to talk a little bit about cost. Lindsay brought up the point that affordability is relative, and I really want to emphasize that. The middle housing units that we are building in Kirkland are not affordable by anybody's measure. They are simply much, much more affordable than what the market had been producing to date. So on the left, you'll see one of the relatively newly constructed ADUs, which is, I think, currently for sale right now. This is up in our Juanita neighborhood, $950,000, right? That's a heck of a lot of money, not affordable by anybody's measure. It's a pretty small house as well, right? It's 2 bedrooms, 2 baths, less than 1,200 square feet. But compare that to this real estate listing for a conventional single family house built in our Rose Hill neighborhood being sold for $3.5 million, right? And so again, that ADU is not affordable by anybody's measure of affordability, but it's less than a third of the price of a standard single family house that's built in Kirkland. And if this $1 million ADU allows families who can afford that to live in this unit instead of having to compete with relatively lower income households for a $400,000 or $500,000 condo, I will take the $1 million ADUs because, again, these have a sort of a bigger effect in the housing market in general, at least in regards to market produced units. You can go to the next slide. We have an inclusionary program in Kirkland that encompasses rental and home ownership projects, which we're really proud of, and we're trying to make better all the time. For home ownership, for multifamily projects, we require that 10% of the units be set aside as affordable units at either 80% of median income or 100% of median income, depending on the zoning district. I should also mention too that for middle housing, we have our own inclusionary program that's even more flexible than this inclusionary zoning program that applies to mostly apartments and townhouses, where 1 out of every 10 units has to be affordable to folks making the median income, but the unit doesn't even have to look the same as the other units. It can be a little bit smaller. It can be different in nature. And I want to say that, since we've adopted our middle housing rules in 2020, nobody has built projects that trigger those inclusionary zoning requirements, which only apply to projects of 10 or more. So as Lindsay mentioned at the beginning, we really want to sort of reimagine our inclusionary zoning requirements to figure out how we can extract some value from these projects or other projects as well. And just to conclude, in terms of a little bit about next steps for middle housing and affordable home ownership in Kirkland, we want to look at, relook at inclusionary zoning as part of our comp plan process. So we don't have inclusionary zoning right now for single family houses, but we impose inclusionary zoning on apartments and middle housing, which are the types of housing we actually want to build. So can we impose inclusionary zoning on single family houses? We want to comply with HB 1110, but we want to do a lot more than that. We want to actually optimize middle housing in Kirkland. And so that might mean providing more development allowances for middle housing, like more square footage, more height allowances compared to single family houses, so that the default can be people actually building middle housing and not single family housing. And then another thing we want to try to crack is how to protect those existing affordable units that often get redeveloped with projects like these that might house a lower income family. So might we be able to provide incentives to protect that old rambler on a property by giving more development allowances to build more density in your backyard? So anyway, that's just a flavor of some of the things that we're looking at as we move through our comprehensive plan process. And happy to take questions if anybody has any. But thanks for the time.
Thanks so much, Adam.
Great.
Raquel, do we have any questions or others want to add questions to the chat?
Yeah, Adam, we do have one question from Dharma. The question is, if we get a big lot home in Kirkland, can we build duplexes as a group of folks?
Yes, we would absolutely love that. Again, not a lot of folks are building duplexes and triplexes, but you can absolutely do that. You could add ADUs onto those duplex units so that people who buy those units can rent out a unit that's attached to the property to make their mortgage more affordable. So yes, we would love to see more of those housing types get built on our bigger lots in Kirkland. And to be honest, you don't even have to have a big lot to build these in Kirkland. Really, if you own any legal lot in Kirkland in our, what we call our lower density zones, you can build a duplex with ADUs.
Thank you.
Those are all the questions I see. So if no one has any other questions, we can move on.
Wonderful.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Adam.
So Raquel, we're going to let you take it over. I'll start manning the chat for you, and would love to hear you talk about Arch's homeownership program.
Great. Thank you, Lindsay. As Lindsay mentioned, my name is Raquel Rodriguez, and I'm the program coordinator here at Arch. My role in homeownership is to market Arch homes that come to the program to communities that need it the most. Next slide. The Arch homeownership program has over 700 affordable homes, and Arch plays an ongoing role to make sure that the homes remain in the program and are owner occupied. Through our resale covenants that limit prices and eligible buyers, we can maintain long-term affordability throughout the life of the home. Arch provides ongoing stewardship to homes in our portfolio, ensuring ongoing compliance with the covenant requirements and supporting the resale process to ensure homes are purchased by income qualified buyers and the resale restricted prices. As you can see by the map on the right-hand side, there are Arch homes throughout all of East King County. Next slide. Arch has both new construction homes as well as resale homes for purchase. These homes are established through developer requirements and are priced below the market. An example of a project we currently are working with is Woodside in Redmond, where we will have 9 units priced at 50% of the area median income. So think about $150,000 homes in East King County. Next slide. The new construction homes are built and made available by developers thanks to city inclusionary policies. Arch works with each developer to ensure that the homes comply with the requirements set out by our member cities. Arch prices the homes to be affordable to the applicable income levels established by the city. The range of affordability is between 50 and 100% of the area median income. Once we price the homes, we help the developer market the homes. We send purchase opportunities to the Arch mailing list and allow buyers the time to get a pre-approval letter, to submit an interest form, all in order to be considered to purchase the Arch home. Arch then verifies eligibility and supports the buyers through the process. New construction homes are not uploaded to the MLS. Next slide. Great. In addition to new construction homes, when existing Arch homeowners go to sell their current homes, those homes are also available to income qualified buyers. All Arch buyers sign a covenant agreeing to resell the home based on a formula that keeps the home below market for the next income qualified buyer. Owners who are selling their Arch homes list the homes on the Arch website, and they're allowed to list the homes on the MLS. Arch's homes are priced below market value. The current owner's covenant defines the maximum resale value and the income limit of the potential buyers. To purchase these homes, you make an offer directly to the seller, and any interested buyers can find a list of all of our homes on our website at archhousing.org. Next slide. There are eligibility criteria to purchase an Arch home. All Arch homes have a maximum income limit based on the city requirements of the developer. Our program has homes from 50% AMI to up to 120% of the area median income. We'll look at current income using most recent pay stubs to determine eligibility. We also have a household size requirement, which is a minimum number of household members based on the unit size. So for example, a 2-person household can purchase a 3-bedroom home, but a 1-person household would not be able to purchase a 3-bedroom home. Next slide. Purchasing a home can be a daunting and exciting experience at the same time, and we at Arch staff know that, and Arch supports buyers as much as possible. We encourage buyers to apply to homes that are within affordability range. Buyers can do this by checking eligibility requirements for each home they are interested in before they even apply. Speaking with the lender about loan options and down payment assistance programs before getting too far ahead of the home purchasing process will also help mold buyers' expectations. Taking a home buyer education course is really one of the most important things we recommend on all of our buyers take. And our link to the Washington State Housing Finance Commission courses is on our website. Next slide. You can find all of our listings on the Arch website, as I mentioned earlier. Listings will have specific income limits, household size, and details how to apply. We also have a frequently asked questions page where you can find a lot of details about our homeownership program and policies. Next slide. Lastly, to find out more about homeownership opportunities, you will need to sign up to the Arch mailing list that can be found at archhousing.org. Next slide. Great. If you have any project-specific questions, you can always reach out to me personally or our homeownership team at homeownership@bellevuewatt.gov. Thank you so much for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions now.
Great. I am looking for some questions. And let's see. This may be just more of a comment. As I stay in Bellevue and trying to show interest in Duval and Issaquah area, where past years sold, I have submitted for one of the listed Arch homes. I'm gonna suggest we follow up with this person. Their interest in maybe purchasing an Arch home and wanting to figure out sort of how that process works, where their applications stack up. And then just a comment about what an incredible service to the community. Okay, I'll just add that we do see many people on the mailing list. And in case there's any doubt, I think about 75% of the 9,000 households on our mailing list are actually looking for homeownership opportunities. So it's hugely important to people with low and moderate incomes as well to be able to access those opportunities. Thanks, Raquel. And
Okay.
Cliff, we are so excited to hear from you now. So take
Yeah.
it away.
Saving best for last. Excellent.
That's right.
Anyway, hello everyone. So first of all, thank you, Arch and HDC, for inviting me to come speak with you on this beautiful Friday. And also, I am so grateful that this is one of the last things I do for Habitat as I transition to my new role beginning of June with the Washington State Department of Commerce as a homeownership policy manager. So I gotta say that from working with Arch, I'm grateful for your work in the community, and also to echo my colleagues that we don't need an affordable housing week. We need an era of affordable housing. Because right now the problem that we face is not just a regional one, but also, in my opinion, a deeply existential one, right? One in which we will be deciding who has access to the beauty, the wealth, the vitality of our cities and communities, and who will continue to be excluded and have access to fewer resources and less equitable, less favorable life outcomes. So that brings me to Habitat's overall vision. That our vision is to, as cheesy as it may sound, is to build a world where everyone has a safe, decent, affordable place to live. And for me, that really resonates, especially someone that has dealt with housing issues, but also we serve a multitude of folks in the community, everyone from grocery store workers to transit workers to nonprofit workers. Hell, many see local staff members in various jurisdictions may qualify for our homes. So we also work with public sector workers as well. But our goal at the end of the day is to make sure that no matter what we do, that we take a concrete step towards that world becoming a reality. So you've seen a couple of hints here and there about Habitat's homes. And again, might seem a bit cheesy, but one thing we like to say is we don't just build homes, we build community. And often our homes are priced at, or rather, we select those who earn about 80% of the area median income and below. And we use a number of these housing types that you've heard today. In fact, the kind of stereotypical image that most people have when I talk about Habitat is Jimmy Carter swinging a hammer, which, knock on wood, hopefully we have our former President Carter and his family stay happy and healthy. But also, these days we actually build more townhomes, duplexes, triplexes, cottage homes. And in fact, there's a project on the Eastside I'll share with you in a moment, where we utilize both duplexes and cottage homes in order to maximize both affordability, but also create as many affordable affordable home ownership opportunities as we can. And that's an important part of what we do. We supply affordable home ownership opportunities because when people are able to have a home, and particularly those who are froze out of the normal housing market. And again, we're talking about many of the very same essential workers who got us through the pandemic. When you have whole swaths of the population that are frozen out of the housing market, you have the kind of crisis you have today. So we work with folks who qualify, who are 80% of the area median income and below, and we ask that applicants complete about 150 sweat equity hours, or what some of us call habitat hours, in order to contribute to both the creation of the home and as a way of just giving back to the community. And with that, we also work with various community organizations and a number of different faith institutions and also I'll bring that back in a little bit, and different organizations to build these homes. So often what this looks like is, for example, working with groups like African Community Housing and Development in South Seattle, or Holy Cross Lutheran Church in Bellevue, in order to be able to not just build homes for those who are in need, but also to build homes for community members that are currently facing displacement. So we can make sure that we anchor folks here. And when someone has a home that they own, that increases the likelihood of their kids being able to finish college. It increases overall wellness and health indicators. It allows them to economically thrive and move up the economic ladder to achieve what many of us envision as the American dream. All of those things are within closer reach, those individual families. But also these the way that Habitat's model works, it allows for people who would not normally be in the market to be able to build up equity on that home and then go on and invest that in either another home when their family situation changes, or when they might want to invest in creating a small business, or, as I alluded to earlier, their children's education, right? So with our impact as just across King and Kittitas counties, we have about 300 plus units in our 5-year pipeline. And in the last decade, actually, if you could go back, please. Okay, there you go. 300 plus units in our pipeline. I think that might have been a very subtle nod to tell me to keep it moving. But that would not be possible if not for our policy work on the state and local level, and for many of our partners, many of whom are on this call. Now, when it comes to our particular impact on the East Side, next slide, please. I want to highlight the Orchard Gardens project. So Orchard Gardens, you saw an example of one of the cottage homes, but we have a series of duplexes and cottage homes that you see in the bottom right. That an example of one of those in the bottom right, that is, there are about 25 of those that are going to go to 25 households who are earning 8% AMI and below. We partnered with Holy Cross Lutheran Church because many of their community members could not stay in the community. That many of their congregants, they found that they had to commute from further and further out in order to just be a part of a community that they had grown up with, that they really found just common common connections with. And so with the kind of code reforms that we worked with Bellevue City Council, shout out to Councilmember Zanazan, who's here, as well as other Bellevue City staff that worked with us on this code, that we were able to build, as well as other nonprofit and affordable housing developers will be able to partner with nonprofit and faith institutions to build affordable housing on excess land. In fact, throughout the region, there are a number of churches just like Holy Cross that are losing their community because community members have to commute from further and further out because housing is becoming less and less affordable in job centers like Seattle, Bellevue, Tacoma, so on and so forth. Well, and I mean, mostly our jurisdiction is specifically within King County, but as a metro area, we are seeing more and more people being pushed out, and thus their communities or rather their support networks are being shattered. So you've heard a lot about middle housing, and I don't want to retread that terrain. So what I'll say is, for us as a permanent affordable housing developer, that middle housing allows us to utilize a housing type that brings down a number of different costs in a time where costs are rising in terms of labor, in terms of materials. Just the pandemic really changed the game. So that, yes. So the these middle housing types don't just create denser units that really blend into neighborhoods, but also that it allows us to be able to have these projects pencil out and to provide first-time home buyers with housing that they wouldn't normally have access to, right? And these are often like family-sized units. These are, for example, for Orchard Gardens, these are going to be 2 to 3 3-bedroom units with 2 bathrooms. And also I mentioned, or I have some Amish cottages listed there. That's an example of a series of cottage homes we built in some Amish years before my time, in which we utilized that cottage typology to create 10 homes for families. And these were 2 to 4 bedroom homes and cottage form, right? So where does this, where do we go from here? So right now, cities across the region are currently revising their comprehensive plans. And without going into the weeds, this is a major opportunity in order to plan for the next 10, 20 years for more affordable housing in communities throughout not just the East Side, but throughout the region as a whole. And being able to put the right policies in place to allow for affordable housing development and to alleviate some of the burdens of housing development in our region will go a long way towards ensuring long-term affordability for many of the most vulnerable residents. And then also this process does create opportunities for not just to have the conversation, but also to create new mechanisms for supporting affordable housing development through closing that funding gap through things like a well-calibrated fee in lieu structure within a mandatory inclusionary zoning framework, right? Just to give an example. But next slide, please. Before we finish, if you have your cell phone with you, then I would simply ask you take it out and text the word habitat to 231 habitat. The number is right down there, 231-422-4828. I can assure you a real human being will get your message and relay that you will be added to our email list, because everything I've talked about, from middle housing reforms to the C1 code amendment that Councilmember Zahn shouted out in the chat and that I was referring to earlier, that was only possible through basically mobilizing the community and making sure community members could be heard during these important policy conversations. And so with that, I would love to take any questions, comments, hurrahs and hoorays that folks have.
Hurrah. Thank you, Cliff. Are there any questions in the chat for Cliff or for any of the panelists? We have just a couple minutes left. Okay. Well, I just want to thank everyone who made time to come listen today. Cliff, you have your hand up. Do you want to say a final word?
Yes. You know what? I would be remiss if I didn't put something in the chat for you guys. So we actually, speaking of the comprehensive plan, we have a letter writing campaign that anyone can participate to, and I'll just put link in chat right now to send a message to your elected officials to tell them that you support a bolder comprehensive plan. And so this is not just for folks in Bellevue or in Seattle, but for if you follow the link, the quorum link I just posted in the chat, it'll take you to our form letter. You can customize it, put in some messages, and make sure that you can be a part of the process.
Great. Councilmember Zahn, do you have a question?
I thought this was a great presentation. I guess for me, maybe it was addressed in one of the other ones, really better understanding the funding pieces associated with it. Because even though it's middle housing, we know that it also sometimes needs subsidies of some kind or incentive. And so I would say that that was a piece that I think is going to be the tougher discussions, but really excited to see what other cities are doing and how 1110 is being carried out. Thanks.
Stay tuned. As I mentioned, we have a work group and a consultant team doing economic analysis. So look forward to sharing some findings from that.
Great, thank you.
All right. Well, thank you to all the panelists for sharing your wisdom and your experience and just emphasizing how important it is for folks to stay engaged in this topic. So thanks for participating in Affordable Housing Week and have a great weekend.